Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In preparing for this debate today, I was thinking about my history when it comes to stamp duty. And I recall quite vividly, I'm not quite sure the year it was, but perhaps in my late 20s, going to see a mortgage broker on the Deadworth Road in Windsor. And I'd been quite dutifully saving for some years in order to achieve my aspiration that lots of young people do, to have to get a foot on the property ladder. And I remember I dutifully took my pay slips and I took my bank statements, and the mortgage broker turned to me and laughed, and he said, "Well, congratulations on saving that, Mr. Rankin. You've now saved the stamp duty. We now just have to save up for a deposit." And it was a joke, but it was kind of true. And one of the things that I was most heartened by what we did in office on these benches, there's been lots of criticism on record, was removing first-time buyers from stamp duty. And I think it's something that's incredibly powerful for young people in this country. But it's not just a historic interest that I might have to declare, Madam Deputy Speaker. If I think about today, I'm a father with a young family. We have 2 boys under 4. In my constituency in Windsor, housing is incredibly expensive. The average house in my constituency is around £750,000, and we're considering a 3rd child. Just like families up and down the country, you know, we're discussing what that means. And for us, my family particularly, the limiting decision, despite us wanting a 3rd child, is housing. We live in a wonderful home in the village of Sunning Hill, but it's probably okay for 3 babes and tots, but it wouldn't be for a growing family. And that's the kind of decisions I think that are being made up and down this country. And one of the things that's made me proud this afternoon to sit on these benches is listening to some of the members opposite. I do say some of the members opposite, because from some there's been this sneering assumption that stamp duty is a tax for the rich. But when I think about me in my early 20s, and many young people in their early 20s trying to put together the stamp duty, that's not a tax cut for the rich. When I think about families trying to get another bedroom in order to grow their families, that's not a tax cut for the rich. And that's not going to any of the other dynamic effects at all. I'm proud that on these benches we stand up for aspirational people like that. And if we think about the crowded field of all the taxes we might want to cut, Madam Deputy Speaker, to my mind, stamp duty is where we might start. We've heard from many members today who have quoted distinguished economists, much more distinguished than anything I might come out with. But it's been clear that stamp duty is one of those taxes that destroys almost as much wealth as it raises. It's anti-growth, it's anti-ambition, it's anti-free market, and as I've already articulated, I think it is anti-family. It is a significant part of the reason why we have such a lethargic housing market in this country. And all that when home ownership is not only key to our prosperity, but perhaps even more so, it's important to people's pride and, frankly, their security of millions of families around this country. It is the foundation of this great property-owning democracy. But we're not in a great state as a nation when it comes to housing, I must say, because for my generation and the generation behind me, it does look, I must say, quite impossible sometimes. To fix this, our focus must be on supply, supply, supply. And we also need a market that freely flows. And frankly, the housing market today is gummed up.
And on that point, would you give way?
I will happily give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. And is he aware that the Parliamentary Secretary to the Treasury, the Honourable Member for Swansea West, he, of course, used to be part of the Resolution Foundation, that well-known right-wing think tank, which itself called upon the abolition of stamp duty to free up the housing market that he's describing.
Well, I would say that I hope that the honourable member in question was closer to the budget, but listening to some of his other utterances, I perhaps think most of us on this side of the House wouldn't think that was the case. But never mind. But the main criticism we have heard from the other side of the chamber, which I think is a fair criticism, is one of cost. So there's been some constructive opposition from members opposite who've agreed that stamp duty is a bad tax, but then have said cost is the problem. And I think they should be a little bit self-aware about that, because one of the reasons we're in such a fiscally precarious place is some of the decisions that they made on that side of the House in their past budget, putting us in something of a fiscal doom loop, which we don't seem to want to have anything chance of escaping. Yes, I will.
Whilst we're on the subject of paying for things and ownership of land and trying to find the funds to pay for a tax to allow our citizens to be able to purchase their own home, well, one absolute obvious solution would be not to give away territory that we already own and pay 36 billion over the lifetime to give it away. So maybe one way my honourable friend could suggest to those benches that we could pay for this is basically avoiding paying to give away our own land to take the tax off our own citizens wanting to buy their own land.
Well, my honourable friend for Fylde is quite right, but at the risk of picking apart the budget in its entirety, but I would suggest to you that the giving away your sovereign land and then paying for the privilege might not be a great thing to do in any instance, but particularly in a fiscally constrained environment. But despite having to have a reasonable answer on the cost, and I will get to that later on in my remarks, I think in this side of the chamber we should also not be shy of talking about some of the positive other fiscal benefits that such a policy will yield. I think one of the areas that we have not done as well as we could have on these benches is making the positive dynamic argument for some tax cuts. Because for every move in the housing market, you see a raft of removals, decorators, window cleaners, gardeners, plumbers, electricians. Do they sound like the kind of people that could be described as the rich to you? We've heard that from members opposite. These are very real working people with decent jobs, generating income for the Exchequer from VAT, from income tax, from national insurance. And we shouldn't be shy of saying that. If we're also lucky, it might also bring a reduction in the welfare spending through job creation. Then there are also, Madam Deputy Speakers, gains that can't be recorded in a spreadsheet. That might be families like mine moving into homes of the right size for them. That might be pensioners right-sizing, and some people have used the word downsizing, but I think the better word is right-sizing, to be closer to their grandchildren. That might provide childcare support for young families, but also the economic and social mobility, taking that promotion in a new area. All of these things might not show up on a Treasury balance sheet, but are really important things for our society. So cutting stamp duty would generate extra revenue for the Treasury in a myriad of new ways that we should be happy to talk about. But that said, we still do need to cost this as a credible opposition. And that's why, and we've heard about it already in this debate, we found as a party £47 billion of savings, all whilst being able to honour our golden economic rule, an economic rule that says the majority of public sector spending reductions that we identify must go on deficit reduction. As a policy, the abolition of stamp duty aligns with many of the principles that those of us on this side of the House hold dear to our hearts. It rewards ambition, it unlocks free markets, and it lowers the tax burden on families. The reason Labour won't make any difference on housing is that they're just too conflicted. Fixing the housing market needs holistic solutions. You can't talk about improving the housing market with the levels of migration that we currently have. We can't talk about improving the housing market whilst overseeing record low house building numbers in London as our developers are strangled in regulation. We need a holistic solution. We need to abolish stamp duty. We need to end mass migration. We do, I'm afraid to say, need to deport hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants. And I also look forward to seeing more ambitious reforms from this side of the House in reforming our planning system. This is part of a vision for my party, and one that I'm proud to be a part of. But it's not just a new vision. Home ownership and supply-side reforms have been at the centre of Conservative vision throughout our storied history, whether that's Stanley Baldwin, Harold Macmillan, or indeed Mrs Thatcher. It's a moral mission to support young, aspirant people through these important gateways of life, buying your own home, starting a family. These are the building blocks of all our communities. Abolishing stamp duty in this costed way will give people the keys to their own secure futures and secure the future of this country. Thank you very much.
Sir Ashley Fox.